Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly AgWeather update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. First of all, I'm sorry I sound so awful. Turns out I ended up getting COVID, and I kind of went through the worst of it this weekend, and hopefully I'm on the mend now, but my voice is still taking quite a bit of time to come back here. The map you've been looking at, though, is one that shows from April 1st up and through this weekend where we stand on our precipitation ranks by climate district. I just want to point out a few things nationally so that we can get some perspective on where things are going here in the near term. Now, of course, we've been extremely wet in the Northwest. We've been very, very wet in the Northern Plains and Upper Midwest. Just repeated systems here causing major flooding problems throughout the Red River Valley of the North, and then the rest of, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. What I'm starting to get concerned about moving forward is that the drought region, which had been kind of beat back in parts of the plains, is going to start to redevelop here in the near term. And while we had some wide open planting windows in the midsection of the country this past week, we're going to start to see those shut down here again. So while major progress was made on corn and soybeans in the midsection of the country, we're going to start to see things slow down. Just thinking about this drought area, though, I'm sure you've all seen kind of some of the news reports on the Calf Canyon fire that's in parts of New Mexico. I'll show you in just a few moments what that looks like here. But let's come over to North Carolina. What we see here is that in and around this region, there's been several places that have been missed by some of the recent precipitation. In fact, just look at the last week. This is all the last 7 days total accumulated precipitation. And there's a lot of places in here where we saw scattered rain. Now remember, we dealt last week with that pesky upper level low that came in at the end of the week, keeping our temperatures cool and a lot of scattered precipitation. Well, I guess it went more like that. And then now it's just moved its way on off toward the north and east and has gone. But just take a look at this map to illustrate how wet things have been here in the last 7 days, including all of the severe weather. That severe weather for the weekend built down the line here into the southern plains and then raced out of the mid-south. And we're going to be dealing with severe storms as our primary risks in the northern part of North Carolina today. I'll show you that in a few seconds, but just there's a lot going on here. Now, I want to show you my Twitter feed really quickly here just to kind of bring you up to speed. This is that Calf Canyon fire, and what you're looking at here are pyrocumulus clouds from that fire as viewed way off in the distance. Again, that is over in parts of New Mexico right now. And also this past weekend just saw some incredible severe weather like these mammatus clouds that were viewed in parts of Oklahoma. The storms that produce those also produce extremely large hail, some of these over softball size hailstones. And then I got to show you one last picture here. This was the shelf cloud on the leading edge of the squall line that went through Kansas City. Again, just amazing to see the severe weather that's come out of the midsection of the United States this past weekend. Now, let's bring it back to some bigger picture things. Over the last 2 weeks, we're looking at the percent of normal precipitation. So I'm going to identify some of those areas that have been in flooding, which we've been talking about here. Throughout the Cotton Belt, we've seen some scattered storms, but there are some drier pockets here, getting all the way back to parts of Texas, where even though there's been some nearby nasty storms, overall we could say that more regions have been missed than have been hit. And that brings me to a map of soil moisture. Now, this is one we're going to have to watch change very carefully through the next 15 to 30 days. I'm specifically very interested to see what happens here. Now, we're also in that time of year over in the Carolinas through the Mid-Atlantic where we feel like we're always a week away from drought. You know what I'm talking about? We can move as we get through May and into June into those time periods where if the systems avoid us, we don't get the scattered convection, the scattered storms, which we're used to. The high heat plus, high evaporation rates just push us toward risk of drought. So the nation is watching very carefully to see what's happening here as well. But I want to point out how wet it has been in the northern plains. And this is an area that I'm concerned may not be able to plant a crop for another 15 days. Maybe quite some time before they get to do that. Got some colder weather coming back in through here and some wetter weather. Speaking of colder weather, let's just look at from mid-April to mid-May what our temperature ranks are. And of course, we've seen more cooler days than warmer days here, while much of Texas, New Mexico, extreme heat. And the northern tier of the United States has been dealing with much colder than average weather on the whole. Now, the last 7 days broke this pattern up in a big way. While we dealt with that cutoff low, we saw summer-like temperatures from Texas all the way to the Great Lakes, and that helped open up a big planting window here in the midsection of the country. But as I said, that's all going to be changing. So I just wanted to run through some history, some perspective here. Now let's talk about where things are going, and as we always do, long range first. Much of our discussion is going to come back to La Nina. Now, this is mid-May, and we have yet to see our ocean temperature patterns break away. Now, I had thought back at the end of winter that this would be fading quickly by now. That's not the case. Ocean temperatures in the middle of the Pacific and up against South America maintain the temperature patterns they've had for several weeks now. And on top of that, what we call the negative PDO signal, that's where there's warm water here and cold water up against this part of North America, that remains. We also need to start having more of a discussion about our upcoming hurricane season and how these ocean temperatures are going to evolve. And at the end of this, I'm going to have to talk about what's going on in India, in the Indian Ocean, as I think it's critical to the long-range picture as well. So I'm going to stuff this full of what I hope to be some very useful information, but let's talk about this La Nina. The Southern Oscillation Index, it stays up here around a value of 20. See that? And that would tell me that the trade winds across the Pacific are very strong. This is a pressure comparison between Tahiti out in the open Pacific and Darwin in northern Australia. So when we see these high Southern Oscillation Index values, which they're very high for this point in May, this tells me that the La Nina has really got, no signal for fast fade. And take a look at this. This was just released. This is the new long-range forecast. It's a 3-month sliding window. All the way out to December, January, February. And the early May analysis from the IRI group out of Columbia University is now very aggressive on keeping La Nina at the highest probability of occurrence going forward. So notice there's a 60% line right here. And as we go all the way out forward, they're keeping it at or above 60%, really, moving forward, with now the chance of El Nino developing backing off to about 5%. Now that is a major swing away from what we had thought just 2-3 months ago. And as a result of that, I need to show you what this historically correlates to. So here we are. This is June, July, August correlation against precipitation. So the drought risk would show up in the reds. So you can see the increased risk here. Now notice over North Carolina, we've got this shading of color, meaning there's a negative correlation. So with the La Nina, we tend to be wetter. Now remember us talking a few moments ago about the colder ocean temperatures here being a part of the negative PDO signal? We'll take a look. Here's where the Pacific Decadal Oscillation is right now. And this is a graphic. I love this. It goes all the way back to 1854. So we can look at all of these past time periods. And with the negative PDO the way it is, this is the correlation for summer precipitation. See how we're wetter here? That's very important because the contrast between the east and the central part of the United States is quite dramatic when you look at these two maps. So what does all this mean? Well, if we look at that June, July, August time period, now we can once again see historically why we tend to see wetter forecasts given the ocean temperature pattern with drier forecast here. It all has to do with the placement of the Bermuda High, which is supposed to be way off here offshore, and it's expected to feed in all summer long, winds, something like this. In other words, this is not a year where, as of now, as of mid-May, we're forecasting the Bermuda High to sit over, North or South Carolina. It's done that in the past, and when it does that, we have extreme drought. Not seeing that right now. If that changes, trust me, I'll be the first to let you know about that. But it appears that we're looking at an above-average precipitation summer while the drought risk increases here. And we've talked about this a lot as of late. Now, what about the next 15 days? Now, over the next 15 days, remember I showed you, I was worried about the drought regaining a foothold here. We see wetter than average conditions coming out of the Canadian Prairie through the Great Lakes. It's also here in the Midwest. Folks that have planted a crop here are going to be happy. But if you haven't yet, this is going to be an area that the increased precipitation is going to be a problem. We notice that we don't see strong signals throughout the Carolinas into Virginia. But I do need to mention, we are watching something possibly brewing in the tropics. Now, it's very early. The models are attempting to bring something maybe here into the Bay of Campeche. It's all over the place, and it's associated with this big MJO movement we saw lately. So I just want to let you know, if something does come out of the tropics earlier, I will let you know about it. But we're all right now just sitting back and analyzing this to see what does eventually develop. Let's stay with our longer term focus. How about from mid-May through June 21st? That would be the solstice. Overall, you do see the wetter conditions being forecast for late spring, early summer. By the way, this is an artifact in the model sitting on top of the Gulf Stream here. Don't pay much attention to this, okay? This is just an artifact we're seeing in the model right now. But what I'm concerned about is the drought risk area here continue to develop while we see above average precipitation. Now, is there any model agreement? Let's go take a look. This is the Cfs V2 model. It's basically the model we run here in the United States, which we would call the equivalent of the ECMWF I just showed you. Over the next couple of weeks, this is the week 1 versus week 2. Notice how they have us drier than average for week 1. That's this upcoming week. But in week 2, do you notice something going on here with opening up quite a bit of moisture in this direction? This again is where some of the U.S. models are attempting to develop something in the tropics and possibly sending their moisture toward the north. I'll keep an eye on this. Okay, this is for next week as we try to finish out the month of May. What about the start of June, though? Okay, initially weaker signals here, and then again, we go back over toward wetter. So you see that whole week on, week off thing seems to be in both models, but we have to be watching the tropics. All right, next 10 days. Let's bring this back home into a nearer term forecast. You do see that we're in a drier week heading up. Highest chance of precipitation I see in the next 7 to 10 days is about a 30% chance for North Carolina, most of the whole state. You do notice we see a wetter signal here, and as I stated earlier, a wetter signal there, but possible drought redeveloping back into the plains. Let's keep an eye on all of that. We do have the risk today as the first system leaves New England for the tail end of the front to increase severe weather risk in through parts of North Carolina here. And just to show you that, let's blow this up. This is today about noon, getting into this afternoon, this evening. Can you see the front right in through here? This is what's going to increase our chance for scattered severe, strong to severe storms this afternoon, this evening, as the front plows through here by 7 or 8 o'clock and exits the East Coast. So that's what I want you to be on the lookout for after that. Now, beyond this, what happens is that the pattern just adjusts such that we have a drier Tuesday into Wednesday. Kind of some of the storm action moves back into the center part of the country here, and that's going to just sit on a lingering frontal boundary. But how long it sits there is all determined by the flow pattern. So take a look. Here's Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday. And what do you notice? It's flat. There's no real well-defined features. So there's this little front that sits in through here through the middle of the week until the end of the week when a deep trough digs into the northwest and tries to eject into Ontario. That means by the weekend, we could see a front come through. But until then, our chances for storms, about 30% for Thursday into Friday. And that's as the heat builds in and we just start to see the atmosphere pop. I mean, that's very normal for this time of year. So let's pick it up here on Thursday and watch. So you see that through Thursday getting into Friday. Let's just go back and forth there. The best chance of rain stays to our north. Okay, that's Thursday, again, getting into Friday. And it won't be until the weekend, until that big low which came through here, drags a front through the eastern Corn Belt and tries to bring it through our area on Sunday. So we have a 30 to 40% chance over the weekend of seeing some scattered storms. But again, that's why when you look at the overall map, we see that we're drier than normal. If we put this together just to show you total precip, that's Tuesday, or tonight into Tuesday. See the front coming through, possibly increasing the chance for strong to severe storms. The next round stays to our north. This is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. See it? And then we're going to have to wait on the front at the end of the week. Here it is, to increase our chances of rain over the weekend. But overall, it's a drier week. So when do things pick back up? Well, here we are. Next, the 10-day forecast out to next Thursday. And you see that playing it forward, we tend to see more ridging developing here with the trough to the west. And that's why the week 2 precipitation pattern doesn't show strong signals for us. But this is important. So is this part of the Midwest. These two areas need to get more planting done, and we're looking at drier conditions. And now do you see what I was concerned about coming out of the tropics? Let's keep an eye down here. We'll talk about it next week as well, but I want you to watch just to potentially see if something does emerge down there. It is dynamically consistent with what's going on right now. Okay, so what you see is we've really kind of moved ourselves into what feels like a summer pattern, right? I mean, we're used to this. Watch what the temperatures do. Monday's highs, mid-80s right here in Raleigh. Going forward into Tuesday, triple digits in Texas, extremely hot, very dry. By Wednesday into Thursday, look, that's our summer temperature pattern, 90, 92 on Friday. But there's that front we talked about. That gets to us over the weekend, but not until really Saturday night when it tries to slide through and knock the temperatures back off. But how far and how long did they get knocked off for? Well, here's day 5 through 10. That's not too significant. And day 10 through 15, we kind of rebound pretty quickly. So overall, we're into that scattered storm time of year. Okay, so we do need to be very careful about what's going on. We know that the longer term forecast, which is what we shared with you at the beginning here, does suggest that, in fact, let's go look here, that our summertime precipitation could be above average. But we're going to watch it all very, very carefully and have a good long discussion each week about, the hurricane season as we start to approach that time period. Guys, crazy just to think that. So what I want to finish up with is this, South America. If you're keeping an eye on the safrinha crops, that's the second crop, the part that's growing down here in southern Brazil, like in Mato Grosso do Sul, Paraná, Santa Catarina, this area, it's about 30% of the safrinha crop. It's going over to very dry conditions, and they're in grain fill right now. And there's the risk, though, of possibly a frost that hits us. So I'm going to tell you, the models aren't going to do a good job picking up on it. But if that frost manifests itself, we'll see a market reaction out of that. So keep an eye in that area. And, of course, a lot of news this past weekend coming out about India and wheat. I just thought I'd bring you up to speed that right now we're waiting on the advancement of the Indian monsoon. And, it's currently sitting here, so it's not yet toward India. But what I want to make you aware of is that once we get into summertime, the Indian Ocean will go into something called the negative phase of the IOD, the Indian Ocean Dipole. That's where there's a lot of warm water here and cooler water there. So this ends up making a circulation in the Indian Ocean that does like this. It comes across the Indian Ocean, rises in the atmosphere and goes back across and sinks. This tends to lead toward a more active monsoon. By the way, in the Pacific Ocean, this is what La Nina does. Sends its motion that way. It rises and comes back across and sinks. That's how that works, the tropical vertical circulation. And what's important about that is if we zoom in on Asia, which gives us a good view of India, and say, well, what about your summer precipitation? You can see here that June, July, August is expected to be wetter than average. So we need to keep a close eye on what's happening in this part of the world just because of some of the news as of late. All right. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. I'll talk to you all again next Monday. I hope I feel a lot better then. Until then, you all stay safe and well, and we'll keep an eye on the weather together. Thank you.